From Morgellons to COVID-19 somehow being cured by vitamin C or purging yourself or something. How do you determine what pathogen causes what disease? Now, I'm using that word in a very general way, and it's wrong. But something that causes a disease, we're going to call a pathogen, or just a disease causer. And the disease is whatever ails you, or more accurately, whatever your symptom set is. You can have a set of symptoms that match hundreds of different viruses or bacteria or protozoa or funguses or whatever. You can have one bacteria be able to cause hundreds of different reactions in people. So how do you narrow this down? Well, I'm going to give you the example of Morgellons, an area in France that was at one time referred to with the word Morgellon. Some of you already know about this, but I'm going to bring up the irony about it. This is an example, or maybe the example, of the first time human beings found an actual cause and effect nature for a disease. Not just correlation, but causation. And this was because a mite that would crawl under your skin as a parasite would eat a layer of skin underneath and leave a pathway of fecal material after eating it and processing it and living off of the food that it gets from eating pieces of you. And it would also lay eggs in the fecal material. And this would cause the eggs that hatched that want to do the same thing to hatch and go off on an angle, not following the same pathway. In the process, this would create a fibrous-looking thing underneath the skin, and sometimes blood vessel damage, capillary damage, which would congeal, and in some cases form scar tissue strings, at which point a person might pick open the thing, instinctively trying to remove the pathogen, or in this case, parasite, which, by the way, that's one of the reasons people scratch at an itch. It's a way of removing fleas. If you're not aware of it, a lot of our history is based on fleas. But anyway, let's go on with it. And sometimes they would pull on the end of where the entrance was or wherever and pull out a length of something that looked like a fiber. Anyway, the microscope had been invented by then, and someone decided to look at this stuff under a microscope or a magnifying lens or something, and found out that it was caused by things that were really moving around. And they also noticed others like them, but people who had this condition had this specific type of critter crawling around, tunneling under the skin, and eating. That's it. That's what's causing it. Because if they took that one off of a person and put it on another person, it would start digging into that person. Now, that's not a bacteria or a virus or a fungus or a protozoa. It's a parasite. Worms that get into the digestive system, sometimes people would see them and realize a worm had gotten into their gut and realize, well, we need to get rid of that. But that wasn't associated with the disease. People found out this one happened. And it's very ironic that on the internet, if you type in Morgellons, instead of finding an example of scientific method in its first stages happening, you find people who are profoundly anti-medical science. Almost like someone picked that specifically to turn it into a joke. In the 1800s, there was a need for microorganisms, pathogens, to be associated with whatever disease and vice versa. Cause and effect, correlation, causation, we have to figure it out. So the idea was you had to first find it in abundance in victims, and in anybody who isn't a victim, you shouldn't be able to find that disease causer. Now that seems like a really logical idea, except your digestive tract is filled with bacteria that could absolutely hurt you or even kill you, but it's isolated in your digestive system and doesn't do so. This first principle, the first of four, created by a person named Dr. Robert Herman Koch, was simply wrong. Why am I saying that? Because he said it was wrong, because he didn't do this as a deathbed confession, which people somehow think means something more. He did it while he was trying to refine his original four ideas, because this is the first one of four that he found to be wanting. Second one, after you isolate it from a person, figuring out it's there, you have to be able to test it in a pure culture in a petri dish or something. Except that doesn't work because many diseases, the causative agents for them, the pathogen, only work under a specific set of conditions that you and I would consider not pure. It wasn't just a food source they lived in. They had to live in any environment. They could live in the environment without a food source for a period of time, but they couldn't live in just the food source. They had to be in the environment. So that didn't work. And again, Robert Herman Koch acknowledged this and changed his answer and his principle or his postulate here. The third idea is that after you get away with doing those two things, which he's already said he has to either refine or throw out entirely, you should be able to infect a test victim, and they should definitely get sick. Except that some diseases go through intermediate stages or go through vectors that they don't infect. Some creatures even do it based on timing or whatever. It's not that clear cut. And that third postulate is gone. Also, if you're not aware of it, it implied that you only could do this really with animals and humans. So the idea is that it had to be diseases exclusively that would attack both humans and animals, because that was the biggest problem they had at the time. They didn't want to deal with diseases that only attacked humans or only attacked animals. You can't really test it that well. So unless it's zootonic in the first place, this wouldn't work either. Or you could just infect some poor victim you held down really hard. Fourth idea is that you had to then take it from that victim and then re-isolate it one more time. By the time the guy was old and about to die, not on his deathbed, but a year or two before he died, when he was perfectly healthy and still doing this sort of thing for a living, being awesome as he was, or trying to come up with a scientific method for doing cause and effect, not just correlation, but causation, he had thrown out all four of these ideas. So what do people do now? A lot like Morgellons being used as a word, twisting around an achievement in history. People will only look at his first draft version that he's embarrassed by being wrong about and probably slap you in the face for not learning from. He made a set of mistakes. All four of them are filled with minor errors. They're too generalized. But you can cite them. Oldest medicine is best medicine. Get out the leeches. Leeches are useful in a couple of areas. I mean, we can use something that they produce they call it Draculin. I mean, that's got some use. A lot of you have had a heart attack. You might know about something similar to that. But Robert Herman Koch wouldn't agree with you reusing his work when it wasn't done yet. Now we'll get on to Andrew Kaufman. He thinks, or he's decided to say, that viruses observed through a microscope have to be exomes for some reason. And because he wants that to be a pushed purpose, he's treating it like a court case. He tries to find support for his opinions by quoting from respected scientists who immediately say, that's not what was in my work, and or that's not what it means. Not just misquoting Koch here, he misquotes people contemporarily who can literally tell him to his face in a couple occurrences, that's not what the study showed. Why are you misinterpreting my work, you troglodyte? He misrepresents scientific information to fit his theories, or outright lies about people's assertions. He also has videos like how to detox and humans aren't a virus. I'm not sure the Earth would agree with you on that. Actually, it might. It might just say we're a pestilence. So anyway, what is his assertion? COVID-19 or all viruses are exomes. What are exomes? The association between them is that some viruses, not all of them, can exploit an exome, which is a naturally occurring thing on the surface of cells, to leave a cell that they've infected. They borrow part of the cell, and the exome is excluded from being attacked by your immune system. That's literally all it's doing, is it's ripping the skin off of one of your cells and running around it saying, I'm safe, don't worry about me. Ooh, look, another brain cell. They don't actively transport themselves, but they make themselves chemically biased so that they can attach to certain cells, a form of intelligent transport. Even if it's bumbling around for a long time, it eventually finds a cell, and it has to be generalized enough to attack certain cells. Well, any cell, really, but most cells. There are some diseases, bacteria included, even parasites, that only attack certain cell types under certain conditions. They won't do it under all conditions because that has turned out to be an advantage in some way that has accidentally happened. This bumbling about methodology doesn't just work for non-living, non-motile viruses. It can work for things that literally live in the world. Predatory animals are a lot like parasites. They live off of other living things by consuming them, but they can't kill all of them. If a wolf goes through and does surplus killing of all the rabbits, it'll starve because all the rabbits rot and it runs out of food. Exterminating a species means you cannot benefit from it later. Viruses are the same way. Hardcore viruses that wipe out entire populations die with them. That's why most viruses don't do it. It's not because they're being intelligent. It's because that's what works. Same thing with bacteria. If it dead-ass killed literally everybody, it's not going to get any further because it can't transfer to the next host. Most viruses cannot live outside of a host. Most bacteria can't either. Well, some can. The purity test in a petri dish is an example of how you find that out. It's not a way of confirming or denying its existence. It just means you're using the wrong test. This was acknowledged by the person who came up with the test and corrected it. And then we have Dr. Andrew Kaufman, who is making assertions because it ought to be this way, mostly because he might be, I don't know, trying to sell you something. I don't know. I'm not even bringing that up. Now, this is the part where the video where I have to repeat what you should have read in the description. You don't have to comment on the video. You don't have to rate it. You don't have to subscribe to my channel or hit the stupid little bell. You don't even have to watch the video. You can just read the description below and also look at all of my citations. I'm going to include two major ones for a website called Integral World. Biases aside, the source actually gives a very good rundown on why Dr. Kaufman is probably wrong about most of what he's saying. And more importantly, why he's probably very much aware that he's wrong. And now we get to the next point. This person's either masquerading as or really is a doctor. That means he has to do due diligence. If he's quoting 4 principles or postulates that were wrong before the year 1905, that's medical malpractice. You're ignoring something because you have some other bias. If he's quoting scientists who tell him immediately, that's not what the work means, that's not what my paper said, and he ignores it, that's not good. Full steam ahead as we go off the cliff, even though we're running out of fuel, because damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead. And no, that's not how to solve problems. And that's the next part of this. This man isn't solving any problems, but he is appealing to contrarianism. A person has decided to come to the channel and tell me all sorts of things about myself and how I think. Regardless of Dr. Kaufman's personal opinions, misspelling opinion, he is presenting a scientific argument. Counterpoint. He's presenting a profoundly anti-science and anti-medical opinion or argument. And again, he's quoted people who've said you've misquoted me. He's quoted people who can't say you misquoted me because he misquoted somebody from a long time ago who who corrected his own work. He is also quoting people who said, that's not what the story is, that's not what my work is. He's making things fit his original idea instead of letting it go when he's wrong. And again, this is from a simple misinterpretation of him seeing something, maybe in a microscope or whatever, and deciding that has to be the problem, not what everybody else thinks, because to hell with literally now hundreds of years of progress. Let's shit on it because I want to be right on the YouTube comment section or on a YouTube video. Waptek, you instead are making it personal. He's misquoting his sources. He's quoting a source that recanted not on his deathbed, but long time before that. You can present your argument with evidence. Yeah, I did. You ignored it. If you are a real doctor, that's not required. You're not a real doctor. We all have to evaluate this. I evaluate him as being a bad source. You have no scientific basis for your contradictions. I present only scientific ones. Let the guy do what he's doing. No, I will contradict him and prove him wrong because he's dangerous. He's telling people to do stuff that will kill not just them, but other people, and maybe just other people. You can show us what proves virus isolation and transmission. Don't have to. Medical science has already done it. Thousands of other scientists and doctors have done it. And one guy playing Maverick so he can get page views on YouTube doesn't change any of that. The world doesn't give a shit about him. He's being ignored now. Why aren't you ignoring him? Good day.